Income inequality refers to the extent to which income is distributed in an uneven manner among a population. As of 2013, the U.S. has a Gini index, a measure of inequality, of nearly 0.4, meaning we have the second highest level of inequality worldwide. Although inequality can be useful in motivating people to work harder, to innovate, and to take risks, and is therefore good for economic growth, too much inequality can be detrimental to a nation's economy. High income inequality means that some people don't share in a nation's overall prosperity, which often results in political instability because of tension between a wealthy minority and the rest of the population. Moreover, Andrew Berg and Jonathan Ostrey argue that the economic performance of a nation depends on the length of economic growth spurts, and when growth plateaus, income equality is often a contributing factor. By examining income equality in various countries, the authors of one article found that net inequality, after redistribution, is connected to lower economic growth and shorter time periods of growth. One study found that a 1 percentage point increase in the income share of the top 20% would drag down growth by 0.08 percentage points over 5 years, while a rise in the income share of the bottom 20% would boost growth. Other sources claim that the low productivity and compromised health caused by low incomes means less growth.
Already, workers are taking to the streets protesting the need for a $15 minimum wage. The issue of whether or not to raise the minimum wage has been a topic of heated debate across the United States. We now bring you to Audrey Pettigrew, an economist and expert on the matter of the minimum wage.
The real value of the minimum wage, adjusted for inflation, has been decreasing over the past years. In 1968, when minimum wage was at its highest, it was equal to 54% of average hourly earnings in the private sector. Today, it is only worth 36%. Additionally, productivity of workers has been increasing as well. Taking into account inflation and productivity, the current minimum wage should not be $7.25, but actually closer to $15. Many economists are now looking at raising the minimum wage as a way to reduce income inequality.
For our solution to income inequality, we are proposing a higher minimum wage due to its ability to increase incomes of poorer workers and restrict high-ranking workers' income, while most likely being able to maintain a growing and efficient economy. On the surface, we can see that minimum wage helps address income inequality because it provides low earners with higher incomes, thus decreasing the gap between the highest and the lowest earning people. According to a 2014 Congressional Budget Office report, increasing the minimum wage to $9 would lift 300,000 people out of poverty, and an increase to $10.10 would lift 900,000 people out of poverty. However, the benefits of raising the minimum wage run deeper than just immediate gains to workers with lower income. Although raising minimum wage could result in a ripple effect, where companies raise all wages in order to maintain their pay scale, thus having no effect on inequality, a CNN article claims that the more likely scenario is that employers will decrease their higher paid staff's income. This reduces inequality even more as the low incomes rise and high incomes fall, resulting in a more equal distribution. Currently, CEOs in companies such as Chipotle or Walmart make significantly over 1,000 times more than the average employee. CEOs pocket tens of millions, which can be distributed around the workforce in order to reduce income disparity within the company.
Hey, but won't raising the minimum wage mean firms will not have enough money to pay all their employees? A minimum wage is a price floor, meaning that at a set wage above the equilibrium wage, there will be a surplus of workers as supply is greater than demand. This could result in an increased unemployment and the shutdown of many firms.
That is true, but let's take a look at the circular flow model of economics to better understand the relationship between wage and employment. By raising the minimum wage, you are increasing the amount of money supplied to laborers, who are a factor of production. And then, this money goes to their households. With this extra money, households can now supply more money to firms in exchange for goods and services.
Okay, but couldn't the flow chart flow in the opposite direction as well?
Good question. You're right. If the minimum wage increases, there are higher costs to firms. This means firms hire less laborers, and as a result, the income or money supplied to households goes down. Then, the money spent on firms, goods, and services goes down as well, as they have less income to spend, which means that the prices of goods and services goes up, which in the end results in more costs to households and laborers. However, the direction of the flow of the chart that dominates all depends on how elastic or inelastic supply and demand are for laborers.
According to economist Leif Danziger, for each minimum wage rate there exists a critical value of the elasticity of labor demand, such that an increase in the minimum wage rate makes workers better off if labor demand is less elastic than the critical value, but worse off if labor demand is more elastic than the critical value. Because most very low-income people will work a job regardless of how low the pay is, the demand for labor is relatively inelastic. This means that the critical wage value Danziger mentions can be relatively higher without contributing to unemployment.
Going back to the idea of the minimum wage as a price floor, we can see that because demand is relatively inelastic for labor, the change in price of labor from here to here does not produce a very large change in quantity. This also means that increasing the minimum wage includes very little deadweight loss.
The Economic Policy Institute stated that a minimum wage increase from the current rate of $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour would inject $22.1 billion net into the economy and create about 85,000 new jobs over a 3-year phase-in period.
There are also a variety of other reasons for why higher minimum wage doesn't necessarily mean less employment. In a 2011 study, Innovations for Poverty Action examined the effect of a federal increase in the minimum wage on 81 restaurants in Georgia and Alabama. In this survey, managers reported they could identify possible non-wage savings such as productivity improvements due to the minimum wage regulations. It is possible that lower costs stemming from these changes could outweigh the cost of paying a higher minimum wage. Additionally, it's possible that a higher minimum wage could make staying in one's jobs more attractive and thus reducing turnover costs. A different paper in a 2013 survey found that a higher minimum wage leads to fewer so-called higher-end separations or worker turnover, which would also result in savings that could be contributed to the new raised wage of workers.
It is true that many employers claim that they will lay off employees in the case of a higher minimum wage. According to one study, in the case of a minimum wage increase from $7.25 to $10.10, 38% of employers say they would lay off workers, and 54% say they would decrease hiring level. However, employers' bark might just be stronger than their bite. Employers will not necessarily reduce unemployment. What they say is different from how they actually act. Alan Kruger, Ph.D., and David Card, Ph.D., compared employment in the fast food industry after New Jersey raised its minimum wage by 18%, while Pennsylvania did not. Kruger and Card observed that job growth in the fast food industry was similar in both states, and I quote that there was no indication that the rise in minimum wage reduced unemployment. One of the other most popular
suggestions for decreasing income inequality involves taxation. Economists propose the idea of increasing taxes on people with the highest incomes in order to directly lower income inequality, as well as redistribute some of the taxes as either money or additional income, or as benefits such as food stamps for lower income people. However, this solution has a possibility of resulting in decreased motivation and productivity, as well as less business investment and expansion. This is because as people are compensated more for innovating or working harder, they also have to pay more in taxes. Because there is no longer a significant increase in net income, there's a lack of incentives for workers, which in the longer term means a hindrance of economic growth. This solution is also problematic because of the workarounds and tax loopholes so often used by the wealthy. Warren Buffett himself claims that he most likely pays a lower tax rate than his own secretary. Unless taxation is effectively targeted by the wealthy, higher tax rates will fail to significantly decrease income inequality. Currently, progressive taxes on income are not doing the job, and that is where minimum wage comes in.
It's a controversial issue, but as you can see, the minimum wage has the capability to close the gap between incomes of high and low earners and in turn help our economy grow.